Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is one of my favorite video games of all time. It has really awesome characters. A cool feature every character has are taunts. Each character has 3 taunts, and each taunt has a different animation. However, some characters have taunts that deal damage to opponents. These characters include Luigi, Snake, Greninja, and Kazuya. However, what if every character has a damaging taunt? That is what we're gonna find out. In this video, I have combined all the Smash Ultimate characters from Smash 64, Melee, Brawl, Smash 4, Smash Ultimate, and its DLC characters, and I combined them into one video. So this video has all the characters. Now these recordings did come from my respective ranking videos, but if you haven't watched those videos out, you don't have to worry about that because this video has everything. Unfortunately, I do not have a capture card, so I only have screenshots from the game. Now, how did I give each character a damaging taunt? Here's how. If a character has a taunt that seems like an attack, that could be a damaging taunt. If none of those taunts apply, then I would give that character a random taunt, or a taunt from their series. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't watched this video, or any of my previous videos, then watch this video now to know what the damaging taunts will be like for each character. And if you did watch my previous videos, then it doesn't matter. Feel free to watch this video again. Now let's get started. Now let's start with Mario. For his damaging taunt, it will be his side taunt, where Cappy can deal a small damage. This would be pretty similar to the Cappy spin in Mario Odyssey, except it will just be his normal taunt. Looks exactly the same. Nothing different, but it will deal like a minor damage with a small knockback. But the reference would be good, and this seems like a good taunt that can deal damage. For Donkey Kong, I think his up taunt would be the best, where Donkey Kong beating his chest would deal multiple small hits from his arms, like 4 to 5 hits. Animation can be more aggressive, so he will beat his chest faster. But another idea I did have was that he will have an animation where he would like pound the ground, but that would seem more like an attack rather than a taunt, and so him beating his chest up would be a good idea for a taunt that deals damage. If any opponent is close by, then Donkey Kong would deal like 4 to 5 small hits with very weak knockback. So yeah, his up taunt would be his damaging taunt. For Link, I think that his up taunt would be the best as a damaging taunt, because in that taunt, Link slashes twice with his sword, and so his sword would deal damage. The 2 slashes, it will do 2 small hits, and overall that seems like a best idea for a taunt that deals damage, because that seems closest to an attack. So yeah, Link, it will be his up taunt. Animation would be pretty much the same. For Samus, I think that the side taunt would be the best, where Samus's arm cannon 0 laser configuration has a small hitbox that will deal like either like a single small hit with a weak knockback, or multiple very weak hits with a very weak knockback. I think that would be the best idea for a taunt that can deal damage for Samus. So yeah, for Samus, it will be her side taunt. For Yoshi, I think his side taunt would be the best, where Yoshi's body has a small hitbox when he chases his tail. It deals like a 1 minor hit, and it is out there for like a couple of frames, and overall deals the same damage overall. And yeah, I mean, and it will deal a pretty weak knockback, but this does seem like the best taunt. Make his animation a bit faster so that the attack duration would be smaller, and his taunt will be over quickly, and so that's the small change that will happen to his taunt. But otherwise, his body has a hitbox dealing one minor hit, and that will be his damaging taunt. Now for Kirby, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt. Now, the taunt itself would not deal damage, but the star, as a projectile, would deal a small hit. Now because that star is a projectile, it can be reflected, and if reflected, then Kirby will get hit. And the star, it will deal a small damage with a pretty small knockback. Now if he inhaled an opponent and does a taunt to get rid of their ability, then that star would also deal damage. And that star would still be a projectile, so it can be reflected, but does the same damage and knockback regardless of which taunt you choose to get rid of that ability. Now for Fox, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt. So, where the fire hitboxes deal multiple small hits, like his up special. I mean, his up special deals a lot of damage. This taunt though, it will deal like couple hits with like very small damage, like 1% each hit. It'll be like that. And it wouldn't deal like a crazy amount of damage, it would deal like 5 to 7% damage at most. And so that will be his taunt. And it makes sense because they're fire effects, so it will act as a fire effect. But yeah, his up taunt would be the best for a damaging taunt, and the most sense. Now Pikachu, it will be his up taunt, where the electricity hitbox deal multiple small hits. So it will be like Fox's up taunt, dealing like 5 to 7% at most with a couple hits. And yeah, it will be pretty much the same as Fox's up taunt, except it will have electric properties instead of fire properties. But yeah, his Pikachu's up taunt would be the best. Now for Luigi, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where, his taunt already deals damage in Ultimate. So there's nothing more to say about this taunt, the animation would be the same. However, one change I would give is that give an extra frame of hitbox. So in Ultimate, there are 2 active frames where it deals damage. This one though, give it an extra frame, so 3 frames. And then increase the knockback. So it will still be a set knockback, meaning it won't kill if the opponent is grounded. But in the air, make that deadly taunt even more deadly. Alright, make this taunt even more brutal. Alright, that would be really cool. But otherwise, it will be the exact same taunt. Right, already deals damage, so nothing more to say. For Ness, it will be his down taunt, where the PSI deals couple minor hits. And so, because there's PSI there, it will make sense that the PSI would have hitboxes and it will deal a couple minor hits. But other than that, yeah, just the PSI has hitboxes that will deal small hits with weak knockback. And yeah, that will be his damaging taunt. Now for Captain Falcon, it will be his up taunt, where the fire hitboxes deal multiple small hits. And so for this one, make the animation a bit faster so that it can only deal like a couple hits. So like 4 to 5 hits, dealing small damage with very weak knockback. And this makes the most sense. And much like Fox's, Falcon's up taunt will have fire properties, so it can blast explosives right away. But yeah, his Captain Falcon's up taunt would be his damaging taunt. For Jigglypuff, it will be her up taunt, where her puffing up would deal a small damage. The spin, though, it would be removed and only have the pose like Smash 64. However, the balloon, it will be a bit bigger. You know, it's kind of like Final Smash where Jigglypuff puffs up and then deals damage. It would be kind of like that, except the puff would obviously not be that big. And so, only the puff would deal damage. And it will deal like a small damage with set knockback. Or maybe not set knockback, but like whatever percentage the opponent is in, the further they'll get knocked back. but that will be her up taunt. It will just be like Smash 64, but the balloon is expanded and deals damage. Now let's get started with Peach. Her damaging taunt would be her up taunt, where her umbrella has a hitbox when it spins, dealing multiple weak hits with a weak knockback. So there would be a hitbox at her umbrella that does a couple percent of damage, and deals a very weak very weak knockback, and yeah, that will be her damaging taunt. For Bowser, it will be his side taunt, where his bites have a hitbox that deals some damage with some knockback. So this would be one of his stronger taunts. It will be one of the stronger taunts in the game, and that deals some damage and knockback. However, he'll be pretty vulnerable during that period. And the taunt would also be reduced to 2 bites. So that's a change that will be made, but that would be Bowser's damaging taunt. For Ice Climbers, it will be their side taunt, where the hammer has a hitbox when they do their pose, which deals some damage with some knockback. And let the animation have them do more of a swing to get them do their pose, but yeah, this one though, it will be their damaging taunt. For Sheik, it will be her side taunt, where her tripwire has a small hitbox that deals small damage and a weak knockback, and make her face more towards the opponent and bring that tripwire closer to the opponent, so it would actually deal damage. And it will be pretty weak damage with a pretty weak knockback. But that's what I can think of for her taunt. For Zelda, her damaging taunt would be her side taunt, where the fire deals multiple weak hits with a very weak knockback. And so the fire has a fire property, and so it could light explosive barrels, and then it deals multiple weak hits with a pretty weak knockback. But that's the best damaging taunt for Zelda. For Dr. Mario, it will be his side taunt, where the capsule deals 1 hit with a minor knockback. And so this one, it deals less damage than his neutral special, but it does have really good vertical range, and it deals a pretty minor knockback as well. But that makes the most sense for his damaging taunt. For Pichu, it will be his up taunt, where the electricity hitboxes deal multiple hits to the opponent. It will deal more damage than Pikachu's up taunt, so it will be really similar to that, except more damage. However, it will also deal recall damage. So whatever percentage Pichu deals damage to the opponent, the recall damage would be like 1/3 of the percent Pichu deals damage. So, it's the maximum damage Pichu can do, alright? Not like how much damage he deals to the opponent. So the recall damage would also be, it will always be the same damage, whether he hits the opponent or not. It will be 1/3 of the maximum damage that he can deal to the opponent. And it also makes sense to do recall damage, because Pichu always takes recall damage from electricity attacks, so this is why it deals recall damage. It also makes sense. So that will be Pichu's damaging taunt. For Falco, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where the end of the animation deals damage. And so at the end, Falco would slap the opponent, dealing a weak hit with a weak knockback, and make his ending of the taunt give Falco an animation that seems even more like a slap, where he would actually slap the opponent. It will kind of look like that, but that's the best taunt for Falco that can deal damage. For Marth, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the sword during the pose would deal a weak hit with a weak knockback. And of course, it will have more damage dealt at the tip of the sword. So this is the best taunt I can think of for Marth that deals damage. For Young Link, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the sword during the pose would deal a weak hit with a weak knockback. It's similar to Marth's, but alter the sword angle so it will seem like a stab, so the degree of the sword would be higher, Like this one seems like around 45 of 40 degrees, so make that like 75 to 80 degrees, or maybe 90 degrees, so like it will be like a stab. So it will be pretty similar to Mart's. For Ganondorf, his damaging taunt will be his side taunt, where his dark spells would deal some damage with some knockback. So this is another one of the stronger taunts in the game. However, Ganondorf would be very vulnerable during this period. So yeah, Ganondorf would have a really strong taunt, but he would also be really vulnerable, and so, but that is the taunt I could think of for Ganondorf. For Mewtwo, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where the dark energy would deal multiple small hits with a weak knockback, so kinda like Fox's damaging taunt, but except it won't have fire properties. It will be a dark attack, but this is the taunt I could think of for Mewtwo that can deal damage. For Roy, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, which is another pose showing the sword. And for Fire Emblem characters, that is all I can like think of for majority of them, because I never played any Fire Emblem games, so it cut me some slack if you don't like this. But yeah, give the sword a fire effect where it deals 2 hits and has some fire properties, so it will be pretty different from Mart's taunt. And you know, it doesn't have to like, the sword's angle does not need to be altered. Just had some fire effects, so it will not be like a stab. You know, it will just be him showing his sword with a fire effect, and that is what deals damage to the opponent. And that would be the best taunt for Roy that deals damage. Lastly, Mr. Game & Watch. His damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the bell would deal 1 hit with a weak damage and knockback. This could also be the case for his side taunt as well, but I think that he should get a different, unique taunt for his side taunt, and his up taunt will be the one showing his bell and dealing damage. And that is all I can think of for Game & Watch's damaging taunt. And it could be either his up or side taunt, but he needs to have a unique taunt for his side taunt or up taunt, either of them. But I think the taunt where him showing his bell, you know, it can deal like a damage. The hitbox would be at the bell, and that's all I can think of for Mr. Game & Watch. Now for Meta Knight, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his wings would deal a weak damage with some knockback. So the wings, both sides have a hitbox, they'll push the opponent, and it will just be a weak damage with a weak knockback, nothing too crazy, but that will be his damaging taunt. Now for Pit, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where his blades would deal multiple weak hits with a weak knockback. So the duration would be for the entire animation of the taunt, and it will be multiple weak hits with a pretty weak knockback, so it's not that too crazy. But that will be his damaging taunt. For Zero Suit Samus, her damaging taunt would be her down taunt, where the Plasma Whip will deal multiple weak hits with a weak knockback. And so the whip covers her entire body, and that's where the hitbox would be. And that's what I can come up with for a damaging taunt. For Wario, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the part where he closes his mouth would deal a weak damage with some knockback. So not like a very weak knockback. It will deal a decent amount of knockback. But the hitbox is only on the chomp. Otherwise, like, it does no damage elsewhere. But the animation, I would make that a bit faster. But that will be Wario's damaging taunt. For Snake, his damaging taunt, well, he already has a damaging taunt. All of his taunts, where when he gets up, the box has a hitbox. But I would make that only his side taunt, which would be the exact same taunt, no changes. But I would give the other 2 taunts a unique taunt. It doesn't have to be a damaging taunt, it's just like a unique taunt that does not have him go inside the box. For Ike, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where the sword would deal damage with a weak knockback when Ike plunges his sword. So the hitbox is only when he plunges his sword. That's the only time there will be a hitbox. Otherwise, once he plunges the sword itself does not have a hitbox. But that will be Ike's damaging taunt. For Squirtle, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where his body has a hitbox that deals one weak hit with some knockback, with a weak knockback. And I'd also add some water effects too. So he will like squirt out water while spinning, and so it would kind of like push the opponent a bit further, but that would be his damaging taunt. For Ivysaur, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his Vines has a hitbox that deals one hit with a weak knockback. And so the hitbox is during the entire duration of the frame, duration of the entire taunt, and so it deals some damage, it deals a weak damage with a weak knockback, but that will be Ivysaur's damaging taunt. For Charizard, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where his entire body has a hitbox that deals one hit with some damage and knockback. So this is one of the stronger taunts as well, and it does deal a pretty good amount of damage. Like, it's like weaker than like a normal attack, but it still deals some damage, like higher than like most of the taunts in this list. And it deals more knockback as well. And yeah, that's what I can think of. And I guess add some flame effects as well. But that will be Charizard's damaging taunt. For Diddy Kong, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his hands have a hitbox when he claps that deals one hit with a weak damage and knockback for each clap. And I would make those claps a bit more aggressive. But that will be Diddy Kong's damaging taunt. For Lucas, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where the PSI has a hitbox that deals one hit with some damage and some knockback. So again, this is stronger than an average taunt, so it deals more than the average damage for the taunts. However, the range 2 is pretty fine, but it will be on the slower side, so Lucas would be pretty vulnerable, and that will like balance the taunt, but that will be Lucas's damaging taunt. For Sonic, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where Sonic Feet has multiple hits with a very weak knockback. So yeah, it deals multiple hits, but really weak damage. And yeah, his hitbox is only on his feet, and does deal a very weak knockback. But that would be Sonic's damaging taunt. For King DDD, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where his hammer deals multiple hits with some knockback. And so yeah, hitbox is only on his hammer, another one of the stronger taunts in the game, but it will be on the slower side, and he would be pretty vulnerable, but that will be DDD's damaging taunt. For Olimar, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where Olimar would swing his Pikmin. And so this is an addition. I added the Pikmin here, and depending on the Pikmin, the damage would be changed, as well as the knockback. So if it's like an elemental Pikmin, then it will deal an average damage. If it's a white Pikmin, then it will deal a pretty weak damage and knockback. And if it's a purple Pikmin, then it will deal more damage and knockback. And if he has no Pikmin, then it will be his exact same taunt. And so this is the change that I would make. I would add the Pikmin, and that will be Olimar's damaging taunt. For Lucario, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the aura would deal multiple small hits. Damage and knockback depends on the aura level, so the higher the damage, higher the damage he has, the more damage he deals with his taunt. And the taunt range would also be greater as well. But that would be Lucario's damaging taunt. For Rob, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where the sparks and his eyes deals multiple small hits with a weak knockback. So the hitbox is only on his eyes, the sparks, and like it's during the entire taunt's duration, and if the opponent gets hit from the startup, then it will deal like 5 hits. Later, then it will deal like less hits, and that's how it works. And it will deal a pretty weak knockback too. But that will be Rob's damaging taunt. For Toon Link, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his sword deals multiple small hits with a weak knockback. And so this animation, he swings his sword many times, and so that's where the hitbox would be. And yeah, the speed, the animation, it could be the same. Exact same animation, except the sword would actually deal damage. And that will be Toon Link's down taunt, and the damaging taunt. Lastly, we got Wolf, the last Smash Brawl character. And his damaging taunt would be his side taunt. And his side taunt is the exact same taunt from Brawl. But his two kicks deal a weak damage and knockback. So yeah, it would just basically be his Brawl side taunt. Except it deals damage. And also, his dialogue, it would be nice if he says the exact same thing he says in Brawl, because that's a lot better. But yeah, Wolf's side taunt will be his Brawl side taunt that deals damage, 2 hits with a weak knockback. First up we have Lucina, which her damaging taunt would be her up taunt, where her spinning her sword would deal multiple weak hits with a pretty weak knockback. So nothing too special about the sword or the taunt, but this does seem like the best taunt that can deal damage for Lucina, and so I'm giving her this taunt. Plus, I couldn't think of any other taunts because I didn't play any Fire Emblem games, so that's the best I can come up with. For Dark Pit, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where his blades would deal multiple weak hits with a weak knockback. So yeah, it's a pretty basic taunt that deals weak damage and knockback, and yeah, there's nothing too special about this taunt, so that's the taunt I can come up with for Dark Pit. For Villager, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his stick would deal a weak hit with a weak knockback. So this one, I would make the animation more aggressive so that he's actually like trying to poke the opponent with his stick, but that would be Villager's damaging taunt. For Mega Man, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where him teleporting back would deal some damage and knockback. So yeah, this one, it is a bit stronger than an average taunt, and so the hitbox is only when he teleports back, so the active frames are not like a lot, but that is the only spot where it actually deals damage. But it deals like more damage than an average taunt and more knockback, so that would be Mega Man's damaging taunt. For Wii Fit Trainer, her up taunt would be her damaging taunt, where her arms have a hitbox that deals a weak damage and knockback. And so in the original taunt, Wii Fit Trainer only he stretches on one side, but for this one, make her stretch both sides, so one time on the left side and the other time on the right side, so that the range will be pretty decent. For Rosalina, her damaging taunt would be her down taunt, where her wand has a hitbox that deals multiple weak hits with a very weak knockback. So yeah, this one, it would just be a pretty basic taunt dealing very weak damage and knockback, and yeah, that would be Rosalina's damaging taunt. For Palutena, her damaging taunt would be her up taunt, where the wings have a hitbox that deals a pretty weak damage and knockback. And so yeah, it's nothing like too special, and the knockback will be like a push. And it would flinch the opponent, but it will be like more of a push, and it's a pretty weak knockback and pretty weak damage, and that's the best taunt I could think for Palutena that deals damage. For Little Mac, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his fists have a hitbox that deals damage and some knockback. And so have Little Mac face to the side instead of to the camera, and reduce the 4 punches to 3 punches, so that the animation and the taunt would be faster. And this one would be another one of the stronger taunts in the game, but that's the best taunt I could think of for Little Mac, and it will fit the most for a damaging taunt. For Greninja, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, which already deals damage. So yeah, I would make no changes in the animation, just make the taunt a little bit stronger, so that it deals just a little bit more damage. But the knockback would still remain the same. For Pac-Man, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, which has a hitbox at his mouth that deals 1 weak hit and a weak knockback. So yeah, it does seem like a multi-hit, and the duration is a bit long, but the damage, it will be a pretty weak hit, just 1 hit, and the damage would weaken the later the opponent gets hit. But that will be Pac-Man's damaging taunt. For Robin, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, which has a hitbox at his sword that deals 1 weak hit and knockback. And so yeah, nothing too special about this taunt, but this would be Robin's damaging taunt. For Shulk, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, which has a hitbox at his Monado that deals 1 weak hit and knockback. And so this one, the hitbox is only on his Monado, and even though it could seem like a multi-hit, this one would be 1 hit, and the hitbox would be at the light, and that is the best taunt for Shulk that deals damage. For Bowser Jr. and the Koopalings, their damaging taunt would be their up taunt, which has the fire hitbox, and the fire, it deals a weak damage with a weak knockback. So it could seem like a multi-hit because of its duration, but throughout this entire duration it deals one hit with a pretty weak damage, consistent damage throughout the animation, and it would also have a fire property as well, so that it could light up barrels and remote bombs. But that will be their damaging taunt. So for Duck Hunt, the damaging taunt would be its side taunt, and the animation is, the taunt is changed a bit. You know, from the background or the foreground there was some gun effects, and those the bullets, they deal a damage to opponent, and that bullet would deal a weak damage and knockback. And so yeah, this taunt has been changed a bit, and I believe that this would be a pretty good taunt, especially since the Duck Hunt and they both laugh. So this one would be a pretty good taunt to add a bullet that deals damage and have Duck Hunt have a damaging taunt. For Ryu, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where his stomp would deal some damage and some knockback. So yeah, this is again another one of the stronger taunts. It does pretty decent amount of damage, like not like a crazy amount of damage, but like damage that's like an attack. And so this stomp has a pretty wide range, and yeah, it deals pretty good amount of knockback as well at higher percentages. So like it can kill the opponent at very late percentages, but earlier than an average taunt. But that will be Ryu's damaging taunt. For Cloud, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, which the sword has a hitbox that deals a weak hit and knockback. And so the hitbox is during the entire animation, and yeah, that's all I can think of for Cloud. For Corrin, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, which the head has a hitbox that deals a weak damage and knockback. So yeah, just as when Corrin transforms, that's where the hitbox starts, and yeah, it deals a pretty weak damage and knockback. And yeah, there's nothing else to say about the taunt, other than that will be Corrin's damaging taunt. For Bayonetta, her damaging taunt would be her side taunt, which in the end, the animation kind of like changed a bit. Like the pose would still be the same, but Bayonetta would fire a bullet at the end of the taunt, and that deals a pretty weak damage and knockback. So it's pretty much like, it's a bit less damage than Bayonetta's neutral special Uncharged, and so yeah, knockback 2 would be less than that, but that would be a change to Bayonetta's taunt that can deal damage, and that will be Bayonetta's damaging taunt. For Mii Brawler, Their damaging taunt would be their down taunt, which the 2 punches would deal 2 weak hits with a weak knockback. And the animation, I would make the animation the Mii Brawler face more towards the side, towards the opponent. And yeah, other than that, the animation itself would be the same, and that would be Mii Brawler's damaging taunt. For Mii Sword Fighter, their damaging taunt would be their up taunt, which the sword would deal multiple small hits with a weak knockback. And again, it's pretty similar to the other sword swing poses, and there's nothing too special about this taunt. It's the multi-hit taunt that deals weak damage and knockback, and that will be Mii Sword Fighter's damaging taunt. Finally, we have Mii Gunner, and their damaging taunt would be their down taunt, which the arm cannon would deal multiple small hits with a weak knockback, and bring the arm cannon closer towards the opponent. And so this one, it would deal multiple weak hits with a pretty weak knockback. And there's nothing too special about this taunt, but the hitbox would be pretty low. But I mean, it wouldn't matter because the opponent would get hit if they're close to Mii Gunner, and so... For Dark Samus, her damaging taunt would be her up taunt, where the phase-on deals multiple small hits. The animation is a bit altered, where the phase-on energy would show up even more, making it like a bit more powerful, but still it would deal a weak damage and a weak knockback. For Daisy, her damaging taunt would be her up taunt, which this has been changed a bit. She hits the Mario Party dice block, which shows a number, and that would fit pretty well for a taunt for her. And the hitbox is only when and where she hits the dice, and the damage and knockback depends on what number she gets. A higher number would result high damage and knockback, and vice versa. So if it's like a higher number, like 6, then you know it'll be one of the stronger taunts in the game, and probably like as strong as Kazuya's taunt. But if it's 1, then it would not make the opponent flinch. And so, you know, the higher the number, the more knockback, and that will be a best taunt for Daisy. For Chrom, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, which is another pose showing the sword. And yeah, this sword, you know, give the sword a more horizontal range, so that the range would be pretty decent, and the taunt, it would just deal 1 hit with a weak damage and knockback, and make the animation a bit faster and a little bit more aggressive. So like Chrom would like instantly show his sword forward, and it will deal a weak damage with a weak knockback. For Ken, his damaging taunt is actually a new taunt, where Ken does 2 small kicks that deal minor damage and a weak knockback, and this would replace his side taunt. So yeah, his side taunt is a complete replacement, where he will do 2 kicks, and yeah, it'll be 2 weak hits and a weak knockback. For Inkling, her damaging taunt would be her side taunt, where the ink deals 3 hits that would deal minor damage with a set knockback. And it would also ink the opponent as well. However, if there's no ink, then it will not ink the opponent and it would not deal any damage. So yeah, this one would be pretty interesting, because it would actually ink the opponent and it will affect the ink meter, and so that is something unique, but it will deal set knockback, so that this would actually never kill at all. But this would still be interesting taunt, and this would be Inkling's damaging taunt. For Ridley, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where Ridley's claw would deal 1 hit with some knockback. And so I would make the animation a bit faster, so the taunt would be shorter. So yeah, this would be another one of the stronger taunts in the game. It won't be like as strong as the other strong taunts I mentioned before, but it would still be pretty decent damage and decent knockback for a taunt. For Simon, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where Simon's whip would deal multiple hits with a very weak knockback. And so I would make the animation a bit faster so that taunt would be shorter. And so yeah, it would just be multiple weak hits with a pretty weak knockback. For Richter, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where Richter's whip would deal one hit with a weak knockback. And so it will have a pretty decent range as well. And yeah, this would fit best for Richter for a damaging taunt. For K. Rool, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where K. Rool's stomp would deal one hit with some knockback. So yeah, this would be another one of the stronger taunts in the game. And it has a pretty decent range. And then there's also some range like outside his foot that would trip the opponent, but it would deal very weak damage. And it would just trip the opponent if within that range. But at the foot though, it deals some knockback and decent amount of damage for a taunt. For Isabel, her damaging taunt would be her down taunt, where the animation is altered. Isabel would use her pom-poms and does a twirl before finishing off with that pose. And so this taunt would deal multiple weak hits with a very weak knockback. And so yeah, very weak damage and very weak knockback. And the taunt itself, it's a bit longer, but the pose would still be there at the end of the taunt. Lastly, for Incineroar, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the flame belt would deal some damage and knockback. And yeah, this would be another one of the stronger taunts in the game. And yeah, it won't be like the strongest taunt in the game, but it does deal decent amount of damage and knockback for a taunt. And the belt itself has fire properties, so it could ignite, it could activate remote bombs and barrels, flame barrels. And that will be Incineroar's damaging taunt. Starting off with Piranha Plant, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the mouth has a small hitbox that deals a small hit. And this would basically be his animation from Mario games, and it would deal minor damage. Nothing too special, and that will be Piranha Plant's damaging taunt. For Joker's damaging taunt, it will be a new taunt, where he would swipe his hand toward his mask with a curse effect, similar to how he steals items in Persona 5. This would be his side taunt, dealing a weak damage and knockback. And so yeah, it would just be taken from his Persona 5 game where he will swipe his hand and then put it in his mask. And his hand has a hitbox that deals a curse damage. And if there's Arsene, then it could deal more damage. And then during the taunt as well, Mona would be there as well. But instead of the old animation, in his side taunt, he would just swipe his hand forward. And that will be the best taunt for Joker that deals damage. For Hero, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where the slime has a hitbox that deals a weak damage and knockback. And the animation can be altered a bit, where the slime would lunge towards the opponent, similar to the Dragon Quest games. So in Dragon Quest, whenever you fight a slime and the slime attacks, the slime would lunge towards you. And so this would basically be like that, but the slime would lunge towards the opponent between Hero's feet. And so Hero's animation himself would not be different, but the slime's animation would be different, where it would lunge towards the opponent. And that would be the best taunt that can deal damage for Hero. For Banjo and Kazooie, their damaging taunt would be their side taunt, where the animation would be altered a bit. Both of them would do a spin with their instruments before doing their pose. And the taunt, it would deal one hit with a weak knockback. And the hitbox would be on their instruments. And so, yeah. And then the pose itself would also be altered a bit, where they both use their instruments, and that would be their pose. And so, yeah, have Banjo and Kazooie use their instruments before they do their pose, and even during their pose as well. Have them use instruments, and the instruments itself would deal a weak damage and knockback. For Terry, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt, where the animation is altered. So Terry, he would do a spin kick before doing his pose. which deals 1 hit with some knockback. So yeah, this is another one of the stronger taunts in the game that deals a decent amount of damage and knockback for a taunt, and that will be the best taunt for Terry. For Violet, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where the sword has a hitbox that deals 1 hit with a weak knockback. And the hitbox is on the entirety of the sword and during the entire taunt, and so it just deals a weak damage and knockback, and this taunt is nothing too special, but it will be Violet's damaging taunt. For Min Min, her damaging taunt will be her up taunt, where the 2 kicks deal a weak damage and knockback. And so, yeah, it's just a basic taunt, dealing 2 hits and deals a pretty weak knockback. And this taunt, again, nothing too special, but it will be Min Min's damaging taunt. For Steve, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the animation is altered. Steve would use his shovel to get the dirt off, which deals a weak damage and knockback. So he would dig and toss the dirt off with his shovel, and the dirt he tosses would have a hitbox, and there's also a small hitbox at the shell itself as well, and that would deal a weak damage and knockback. And this would be Steve's damaging taunt. For Sephiroth, his damaging taunt would be his down taunt, where the darkness has a hitbox that deals multiple weak hits with a weak knockback. And this taunt would of course be stronger when Sephiroth is winged, and make the taunt more aggressive, meaning that the darkness shown in Sephiroth's body would be bigger, and the taunt would deal weak damage with a pretty weak knockback, but looks really aggressive. But that would be the best taunt for Sephiroth that deals damage. For Pyra, her damaging taunt would be her down taunt, where the fire has a hitbox that deals 1 hit with some knockback. So this one would be, again, one of the more powerful taunts that deals a decent amount of damage and knockback for a taunt. And this taunt would also have fire properties, meaning that it can ignite explosive barrels and remote bombs, but it won't deal any damage to Red Pikmin. And so that will be Pyra's damaging taunt. For Mithra, her damaging taunt would be her side taunt, where the light has a hitbox that deals 1 weak hit with a weak knockback. And so basically this one is just a basic taunt, dealing a pretty weak hit and weak knockback, and it has light properties, so there's nothing too special about that taunt, but that will be Mithra's damaging taunt. For Kazuya, his damaging taunt would be his side taunt. And now this taunt already deals damage to opponents, and so there will not really be any changes made to this taunt. The animation itself would be the same. However, I would nerf this taunt a bit. All the other damaging taunts I mentioned, I want those taunts to be buffed. This one though, I want this taunt to be nerfed, because it's a bit too powerful for a taunt. And so that is why I want this taunt to be nerfed a bit. It will still be like one of the strongest taunts in the game, but it would not be like so strong that it will basically be an attack, like deals a massive knockback as a tilt attack would do. But that's the change I would make for Kazuya. Last but not least, Sora, his damaging taunt would be his up taunt, where the taunt has a hitbox on the spell, and so each element deals the same damage and knockback. So despite there being different spells, each time he presses the taunt, it will always deal the same damage and knockback, so there will be no changes there. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked this video, then hit that like button and please subscribe to my channel. This video, I gathered up all my previous videos and combined them into one single video. I hope you really enjoyed this compilation, and with that said, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.